You will not believe what happens to the girl at the end. Make sure to like and subscribe so we can continue writing stories like this one. I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments below.
The Wedding Bargain. Dusty Rivers watched Lily Songbird arrange the wildflowers on the porch swing, her small hands flitting like nervous hummingbirds. He'd been observing her for weeks, ever since Agnes Peabody, his housekeeper, had practically shoved the girl under his nose. Quiet, unassuming, good with accounts, Agnes had stressed. All qualities Dusty found acceptable. He needed a wife and Lily needed security. A simple transaction. He cleared his throat, the sound like gravel shifting. Lily startled, a blush creeping up her neck. "Miss Songbird," he began, the words feeling foreign on his tongue. "I've been giving the situation some thought." Lily lowered her gaze, her hands now still in her lap. "Yes, Mr. Rivers?" Dusty shifted his weight, the porch creaking in protest. He hated this part, the pretense. "My ranch, it needs a woman's touch. Someone to manage the household, handle the accounts. You've proven yourself capable. And frankly, I'm not getting any younger." He paused, waiting for a reaction. Lily remained silent, her eyes fixed on her hands. "So, I'm proposing a partnership. A marriage of convenience. No foolish notions of romance. Just a practical arrangement." He finished abruptly, the words hanging heavy in the air. Lily finally looked up, her eyes surprisingly steady. "And what would be my part of this partnership, Mr. Rivers?" Dusty hadn't expected her to ask. He'd assumed she'd be grateful, relieved. "Security. A roof over your head. Food on the table. A place in society." He waved a dismissive hand. "Whatever a wife is entitled to." "And if the partnership dissolves?" Her voice was barely a whisper. Dusty frowned. "It won't. I'm not one for changing my mind." He stood straighter, his jaw tight. "So, what's your answer, Miss Songbird?" Lily took a deep breath. "I accept your proposal, Mr. Rivers." The wedding was a spectacle. Dusty had insisted on a grand affair, not for Lily, but for appearances. The town gossips needed something to talk about, and a lavish wedding would quell any rumors of a loveless union. He'd spared no expense, imported lace for Lily's dress, a 5-tiered cake that looked like a confectioner's fever dream, and enough champagne to float a battleship. But amidst the revelry, Dusty felt a strange detachment. He watched Lily from across the crowded ballroom, her small figure almost lost in the sea of satin and silk. She smiled politely at the guests, danced with the banker's son, and made small talk with the ladies from the church auxiliary. She looked every inch the dutiful bride, but Dusty saw a flicker of something else in her eyes, a quiet determination that unsettled him. The ceremony itself was a blur. The preacher droned on, the vows felt hollow, and the kiss was brief and perfunctory. Dusty barely registered any of it. He was already thinking about the ledgers, the cattle prices, the upcoming negotiations with the railroad. Later, as the guests danced to the overly loud orchestra, Agnes cornered him near the dessert table. "She's a good woman, Dusty," Agnes said, her voice low and earnest. "Treat her right." Dusty grunted, grabbing a handful of sugared almonds. "She'll get what she's owed." Agnes sighed, shaking her head. "It's more than money, Dusty. It always is." He ignored her, his gaze drifting back to Lily. She was standing near the window, talking to a man Dusty didn't recognize. The man was leaning in close, whispering something that made Lily laugh. A genuine, unrestrained laugh. Dusty felt a pang of something he couldn't quite identify. It wasn't jealousy exactly, more like irritation. He was used to being in control, and Lily's unexpected levity felt like a crack in the carefully constructed facade of their arrangement. He remembered his failed investments in gold mines, the disastrous attempt to raise ostriches for their feathers. Each venture had ended in ruin, leaving him more cynical, more guarded. He'd learned to trust no one, to rely only on himself. And now he was entrusting his life, his ranch, to a woman he barely knew. He took another handful of almonds, the sweetness coating his tongue. This partnership was different, though. This one had a failsafe. He held all the cards, or so he thought. He'd made sure of it. This time he wouldn't lose. A bride's bombshell. The roasted pheasant lay glistening on the groaning board, almost as slick as Dusty Rivers' hair. He surveyed the wedding feast, a tight smile plastered on his face. It was all going according to plan. A respectable, if somewhat muted, celebration. Enough champagne to keep the investors happy, enough pheasant to keep their bellies full, and enough Lily to keep up appearances. He barely registered Agnes Peabody's worried glances from the edge of the room. The housekeeper, bless her cotton socks, thought he was being too hard on the girl. Too demanding. Agnes didn't understand the stakes. This marriage was a transaction, a necessary evil to solidify his position. Sentimentality had no place here. Lily sat beside him, stiff and silent. Her eyes, usually so bright, were clouded with a strange, unreadable emotion. Dusty attributed it to bridal jitters. She looked beautiful, of course. The simple silk gown, a compromise after his initial suggestion of something far more opulent, suited her demure nature. The Reverend Hawthorne finished his interminable blessing. Dusty raised his glass. To my wife, Lily. May she bring me many sons and manage my household with diligence. The toast felt brittle even to his own ears. A smattering of applause echoed through the dining hall, punctuated by the clinking of glasses. As the guests began to tuck into their pheasant, Lily rose. A hush fell over the room. She hadn't touched her food. I also have a toast, she announced, her voice clear and steady, yet carrying a tremor that sent a chill down Dusty's spine. He hadn't given her permission to speak. She reached into the folds of her dress and produced a document. A deed, yellowed with age but bearing the unmistakable insignia of Rivers Rail. This, she said, holding the document aloft, is a deed signed by my uncle, Silas Blackwood, granting me 50% ownership of Rivers Rail. The silence that followed was deafening. Forks clattered onto plates. Champagne bubbles hissed unnoticed. Dusty felt the blood drain from his face. What is this nonsense? He sputtered, rising to his feet. Lily ignored him, her gaze sweeping over the stunned faces of the assembled guests. Josiah Grimsby, his most important investor, looked as if he might choke on his pheasant. My uncle Silas built this railroad with his own 2 hands, Lily continued, her voice gaining strength with each word. He was a fair man, and he knew that one day Dusty Rivers would try to take it all. So he protected me. He ensured that I, his only heir, would inherit my rightful share. Dusty lunged for the deed, but Lily stepped back, deftly avoiding his grasp. Agnes Peabody, surprisingly quick for her age, positioned herself between them, her eyes blazing with a fierce protectiveness he hadn't known she possessed. This is a forgery, Dusty roared, his face contorted with rage. A ridiculous, pathetic forgery. It's not a forgery, Lily retorted, her voice unwavering. The signature is genuine. The ink is analyzed and the lawyers have confirmed its validity. I had it checked before anything else. He stared at her, a dawning horror creeping into his eyes. This wasn't the meek, pliable girl he thought he had married. This was something else entirely. A coiled spring ready to unleash its pent-up force. Josiah Grimsby cleared his throat, his voice raspy. Dusty, is this true? Dusty ran a hand through his hair, the carefully sculpted waves now a disheveled mess. It's complicated, he stammered. There must be some mistake. There is no mistake, Lily said, her gaze locking with his. From this day forward, I am not just your wife, Dusty Rivers. I am your partner. 50% owner of Rivers Rail. The room erupted in a cacophony of whispers and gasps. Dusty stood frozen, the remnants of his carefully constructed world crumbling around him. He had wanted a wife, a showpiece. Instead, he had acquired a rival. And she had just dropped a bombshell that would shatter everything he had worked for. The taste of pheasant in his mouth had turned to ash. The Blackwood legacy. Silas Blackwood was my uncle, Lily announced, her tranquil tone a sharp contrast to the gathering squall in Dusty's gaze. The space constricted, the air thick with unvoiced accusations hanging heavy. Dusty Rivers' fingers clenched around the mahogany tabletop, his knuckles gleaming like polished bone. Silas? You're Silas? But he's been gone for years. Indeed, Lily confirmed, meeting his stare unflinchingly. He died 3 years ago. Before his passing, however, he ensured my future. She indicated the document sprawled between them, its inked pronouncements like a dark poison seeping across the pristine paper. This is his bequest. He bequeathed to me half of Rivers Rail. A strangled sound, caught between a scoff and a snarl, erupted from Dusty. Silas wouldn't. We were co-creators. We birthed this empire together. He shoved his chair back, beginning to prowl the room like a trapped panther. A hand raked through thinning hair, the silver threads catching glints from the chandelier's prisms. Lily remained seated, a silent spectator to his escalating fury. Apparently, his sentiments shifted near the end. The words struck him with physical force. Dusty halted his pacing, his eyes hardening. Silas had always been the quiet force, the intellect behind the muscle, the inventor whose mind spun with innovation. Dusty had been the charismatic face, the persuasive negotiator, the one who charmed financiers and intimidated opposition. Their pairing had been a perfect, pitiless mechanism. Until it shattered. A memory surfaced, unwelcome and piercing. Dusty, standing within Silas's cluttered sanctuary, the air pungent with the aroma of solder and the sharp bite of ozone. Silas bent over blueprints, his features illuminated by the stark glare of a lone lamp. "I'm steering River's rail in a bold new course, Silas," Dusty had declared, his voice echoing with confidence. "Westward expansion, a transcontinental line. We require outside capital." Silas had slowly raised his head, his eyes, usually bright with ingenuity, now veiled with a disconcerting calm. "Outside capital? But this was our joint vision, Dusty. Our enterprise. Visions evolve, Silas. And sometimes visions demand resources. Besides, you remain here in your element, inventing. It suits you best." Dusty could still recall the fleeting sting in Silas's expression, the subtle tightening of his jaw. "And what is your specialty, Dusty?" Claiming the credit. The argument had spiraled, fueled by years of simmering resentments. Silas had accused Dusty of being a glory seeker, of exploiting his inventions for personal gain. Dusty had countered that Silas was a recluse, unwilling to take chances, content to tinker in his workshop while the world surged onward. The partnership, once seemingly indissoluble, had fractured beyond repair. Silas had retreated inward, becoming more isolated, his inventive output dwindling to a trickle. Dusty shook his head, attempting to dispel the fog of recollection. He'd assumed Silas was simply embittered, disappointed. He never considered. He never breathed a word of this. A deed? He never hinted at a thing. Lily steeled her fingers, her gaze unwavering. "He was an exacting man, my uncle. He orchestrated everything meticulously. He sought to secure my future, knowing I was alone." Dusty searched his mental landscape, desperately attempting to unearth any suggestion, any indication that Silas had been concealing such a secret. Had there been an implication during one of their final, strained exchanges? A veiled menace lurking within his usually cryptic pronouncements? He recalled Silas being withdrawn, but not scheming. Then again, Dusty paid little attention to Silas in his last years. He was too obsessed with expansion, too absorbed in constructing his empire. An edifice that now appeared to be crumbling before his very eyes. He whirled on Lily, his voice a dangerous murmur. "This is fraudulent. It must be. Silas would never perpetrate this." Lily didn't even blink. "The signature is genuine. The document is legally binding. I verified its legitimacy." She paused, her demeanor softening subtly. "Dusty, I wish to avoid this confrontation. But Silas wanted me to possess what he believed was rightfully mine." Dusty stared at her, his thoughts reeling. He had underestimated her. He had perceived only a simple servant girl, grateful for his patronage, eager to please. Now he perceived a woman of resolute will, a woman who possessed the keys to his dominion. And those keys had been forged in the furnace of betrayal, by a man he had once considered his brother in arms. Panic on the rails. Agnes rushed into Dusty's office, her complexion drained of color. The cloying sweetness of Lily's lingered, a perverse memento of the morning's deception. Dusty, sunk deep into his chair, kneaded his temples, fighting a burgeoning headache. The sun, a cruel jester, spotlighted the gold railroad spike on his desk. "Dusty," she began, her voice a shaky tremor. "The market's in freefall. Lily's announcement has gone viral. The stock is cratering." Dusty's head shot up. "What the devil are you babbling about?" He snatched the ticker tape, its thin paper spewing a litany of catastrophic figures. River's rail was in a death spiral, points bleeding away with terrifying speed. His stomach clenched. This wasn't a correction. It was a rout. "They believe her, Dusty. They think that deed is legitimate. Everyone's unloading." Agnes wrung her hands, knuckles bone white. He surged to his feet, the chair screeching in protest. "Impossible. It's a damned forgery. I'll litigate. I'll bankrupt her." He slammed his fist on the desk, making the spike jump. "Dusty, consider. A lawsuit only validates the claim. We need to control the perception." Authority was slipping through his grasp. He tasted the bitter edge of panic. Only hours ago, the world was his oyster. Now, the door swung inward again, revealing a delegation of somber men in dark suits, the board. Their spokesman, a stout man named Harrington, advanced. Rivers, he said, his tone glacial, we demand explanations. This sombered woman, this alleged deed. Educate us. Dusty plastered on a smile, a fragile, artificial thing. Gentlemen, there's a misunderstanding. A fabrication. My wife is mistaken. There is no credible document. Mistaken? The newspapers are plastered with renderings. Investors are fleeing in droves. Our lenders are poised to pull their capital. Another member, a wiry man plagued by a nervous twitch, pointed an accusing finger. We placed our faith in you, Rivers. You assured us this acquisition was rock solid. It is solid. I'll resolve this. I'll have that deed nullified. She's just a... He cut himself off, catching Agnes's cautionary glance. An impressionable girl being manipulated. Harrington's eyes narrowed to slits. Manipulated? Or perhaps instigated? By you, Rivers? To seize control through unconventional means. The accusation hung in the air, thick and stifling. Fury surged through Dusty, a white-hot tide. Are you impugning my integrity? We are questioning your judgment, Rivers, and your ability to steer us through this storm. Harrington indicated the ticker tape, relentlessly spitting out bad news. This extends beyond marital discord, Dusty. This is about our livelihoods. This is about the very survival of Rivers Rail. Dusty's fists bunched, his knuckles straining. He scanned the accusing faces of the board, then Agnes, her face a mask of anxiety and resolve, and finally the sealed door behind which his bride resided. He would invalidate that deed. He would expose it as a swindle, a cruel joke. He would obliterate Lily Songbird's claim and anyone foolish enough to back her. He would reclaim what was rightfully his. Rivers Rail wasn't merely a business, it was his legacy woven into his very being. And he wouldn't surrender it to some green girl armed with a scrap of paper. He drew himself up, the rage coalescing into icy determination. Gentlemen, he stated, his voice a low growl, I guarantee this situation will be rectified. Promptly. And to our advantage. He locked eyes with Harrington, a silent pledge of war exchanged. I will unearth the truth and prove that deed is worthless. And when I do, this entire, regrettable incident will be relegated to a mere footnote in the annals of Rivers Rail. Yet, even as he uttered the words, a sliver of doubt, small but persistent, began to take root in the fertile ground of his apprehension. What if the deed was genuine? What if his meticulously crafted empire was on the verge of collapse? The lilies in the hallway seemed to mock him with their innocent, pervasive perfume. Challenging the claim, Dusty Rivers' fist detonated against the mahogany table, the tremor threatening to topple Silas's cherished whiskey decanter. Absurd, Agnes. Utterly absurd. Lilia. Songbird, laying claim to half the railroad based on Silas' signature? The man was doddering. Agnes Peabody, rigid as a steeple, adjusted her spectacles with glacial calm. Silas was aged, dusty, not senile. And Lily is family. Family by default. A foundling. She was practically scullery-maid, for pity's sake. Blood suffused Dusty's face, the cords in his neck standing out like ship ropes. He was surely bamboozled, swayed. That serpent must have poisoned his mind. Lily would never dash, Agnes began, only to be silenced. Where is she? Fetch her. I want to scrutinize this so-called deed. Examine the fraud she's manufactured. Agnes remained impassive. Lily is absent, Dusty, and I suggest tempering your fury. Such displays ill become a man on the precipice of losing a fortune. Her lips compressed, hinting at underlying metal. Dusty stalked the room, his burnished boots a staccato rhythm against the polished floor. Lose? She'll rot in the workhouse before she touches what's rightfully mine. This is my birthright, Agnes. The product of my very essence. He halted, his gaze sharpening. You were privy to this, weren't you? You abetted her. Agnes didn't so much as blink. I knew Silas held Lily in high regard and wished to secure her future. He confided his plans. Plans? Plans are vapor without validation. Dusty bellowed. Where's this supposed document? I demand to see it, and I want experts swarming it like ants on sugar. A composed voice drifted in from the threshold. The document is quite authentic, Mr. Rivers. Lily Songbird materialized in the doorway, cradling a sheaf of papers. Her chin was elevated, her jade eyes unwavering in their intensity. She moved into the room with a quiet self-possession that masked her prior diffidence. Dusty could only gape, robbed of speech. You have the audacity to appear here? I do, Lily responded, her voice even. Because I possess verification. Concrete evidence that Silas was of sound mind and that he intended for me to inherit half of Rivers Rail. She approached the table, setting the stack before Dusty with a decisive thud. Correspondence, she announced, tapping the uppermost page. from Silas to his legal counsel detailing his intentions. These are dated months prior to his passing, prior to the decline of his health. She indicated another paper. A declaration from Dr. Albright, Silas's personal physician, confirming his lucidity when the deed was executed. Dusty snatched the physician's statement, his eyes racing over the lines. Albright is a charlatan, doubtless bribed. Conceivably, Lily conceded. But I also possess letters from Silas directed to me, in his own script, articulating his desire to ensure my well-being. He writes of his regret at past failings as an uncle and his yearning to compensate. Dusty scoffed, discarding the document. Sentimental fluff. They prove nothing substantive. They demonstrate his affection, Lily retorted. And they corroborate the intention memorialized in the deed. A deed, I remind you, that was witnessed and duly notarized. The ensuing silence was a palpable weight. Dusty stared at the collection of papers, his expression a rigid tableau of anger and disbelief. He witnessed his empire, his legacy, crumbling into dust, undermined by a woman he had dismissed as inconsequential. Agnes, a silent observer, subtly realigned the documents, presenting them advantageously. The previous evening, under the guise of filing Silas's affairs, she had devoted countless hours assisting Lily in the procurement of these pivotal pieces of evidence. A gamble, certainly, but Agnes was a champion of fairness and believed steadfastly in Lily. Dusty raked a hand through his hair, his gaze flitting between Lily and the damning evidence. This is far from over, he rasped. I will contest this. I will fight you. You may hold some papers, a physician's note, but I command legions of lawyers, I wield influence, and I possess the resolve to pursue this relentlessly. Lily met his glare head-on, her own determination hardening like tempered steel. Then so be it, Mr. Rivers. But I am not intimidated. Vance's vulture act. The air in the parlor, thick with accusation and suspicion, crackled like static electricity. Dusty Rivers, his face a thundercloud, leaned against the mahogany bar, nursing a whiskey that tasted like ash. He'd expected Lily to crumble. To weep, maybe? To run back to the kitchen, begging forgiveness. Instead, she stood her ground, a sparrow transformed into a hawk. Then, the double doors swung open, admitting a figure that could only amplify the tension. Viper Vance. His cologne, a cloying mix of sandalwood and something metallic, invaded the room before he did. He wore a smile that didn't reach his cold, calculating eyes. Dusty, Vance drawled, extending a hand that Dusty ignored. Heard you were having a bit of a disagreement. He turned his gaze to Lily, his smile widening, if possible, into something predatory. Miss Songbird, I presume? A pleasure. I understand you've come into a rather interesting situation. Lily didn't flinch. Mr. Vance, she acknowledged, her voice steady, though Dusty could see a flicker of something, perhaps apprehension, behind her eyes. Vance circled her slowly, like a vulture assessing its prey. Dusty watched, a knot tightening in his gut. He despised Vance, but he recognized opportunity when he saw it, and Vance was swimming in it now. Dusty's railroad, Vance continued, his voice a silken whisper, is, well, it's facing certain challenges. Cash flow, expansion plans, the usual headaches. And now this complication. He gestured vaguely towards the deed lying on the table, a stark white testament to Lily's claim. Perhaps, Miss Songbird, you'd be interested in a proposition? A clean break. A sum of money that would set you up for life. I'm prepared to offer a generous price for your share. Dusty straightened, his back snapping against the bar. He hadn't considered this. Vance, ever the opportunist, was trying to wrest control from both of them. He could buy Lily out, then leverage that ownership to squeeze Dusty into a corner. Lily's gaze sharpened. You want to buy my share? Precisely. A simple transaction. Avoid the messiness of lawsuits and boardroom brawls. Everyone wins. Vance's smile widened, revealing a flash of gold in his teeth. A long silence stretched, punctuated only by the crackling fire in the hearth. Dusty held his breath, waiting, his fury warring with a grudging respect for Vance's audacity. Then, Lily spoke, her voice clear and firm. No. The single word hung in the air, heavy and resolute. Vance's smile faltered, just for a moment. Dusty felt a jolt of surprise, a reluctant admiration blossoming within him. He'd underestimated her. No? Vance repeated, his tone laced with incredulity. Surely you understand the complexities involved. This isn't a game, Miss Songbird. I understand perfectly, Lily replied, her chin lifting. My uncle entrusted me with this share. It's not for sale. Vance's eyes narrowed, the pleasant facade crumbling. You're making a mistake, girl. A grave one. He turned to Dusty, his gaze hardening. Seems you've got yourself a stubborn partner, Rivers. Dusty pushed himself off the bar, his own anger reignited. "Get out, Vance." Vance chuckled, a low, guttural sound. Temper. Dusty. This is just the beginning. Remember, the vultures always circle before the kill. He tipped his hat, his eyes lingering on Lily for a moment longer, a silent promise of trouble hanging in the air. Then he turned and strode out of the parlor, leaving a trail of expensive cologne and simmering resentment in his wake. Dusty watched him go, his mind racing. Lily, standing ramrod straight, met his gaze. He saw not the timid servant girl he thought he knew, but a woman of unexpected steel. He wondered, with a growing sense of unease, what she was truly capable of. The battle for the railroad, he realized, was far from over. It had just begun. And Lily Songbird, it seemed, was ready to fight. Sabotage on the line. The screech of metal on metal ripped through the morning calm. Dusty swore, slamming his fist on the table, rattling the coffee cups. Word had just arrived. Another derailment. This time, it was the westbound freight, just outside of Harmony Gulch. "Sabotage," growled Jebediah, spitting tobacco juice into a nearby spittoon. "Plain and simple. Someone wants to see us bleed." Dusty knew who. Vance had made his intentions clear. But how was he doing it? And why now? He'd expected Vance to play dirty, but this felt different. More desperate. He grabbed his hat. "I'm going to Harmony Gulch. See what I can find." The scene was a chaotic jumble of overturned cars, twisted metal, and scattered cargo. A few men were already picking through the wreckage, their faces grim. Dusty surveyed the damage, his eyes scanning for anything out of place. A glint of metal caught his attention, a length of rail, loosened and subtly shifted. It wouldn't be noticeable to the untrained eye, but Dusty knew rails. He knelt, examining the area around the rail. Fresh tool marks. Someone knew what they were doing. As he stood, Lily arrived, her face pale but determined. She pushed through the small crowd, her usually immaculate dress now smudged with soot. "Dusty, what happened?" she asked, her voice tight. "Sabotage," he repeated Jebediah's assessment, his eyes narrowing as he watched her. Her genuine concern surprised him. He'd been so quick to dismiss her as an opportunist, but maybe there was more to Lily Songbird than he'd given her credit for. Later that evening, after a frustrating day of fruitless investigation, Dusty found Lily in the railroad office, poring over maps and ledgers. He leaned against the doorframe, watching her. The lamplight cast long shadows across her face, highlighting the sharp angles of her cheekbones and the determined set of her jaw. A knock echoed through the office. Vance strode in, his face a mask of false concern. "Lily, my dear, are you all right? I heard about the unfortunate incident." "Get out, Vance," Dusty said, his voice low and dangerous. Vance ignored him, his eyes fixed on Lily. "Perhaps now you'll reconsider my offer. This railroad, it's too much for a woman to handle. Sell me your share, Lily. Save yourself the trouble." Lily stood, her eyes blazing. "This isn't your railroad, Vance. It's mine as much as it is Dusty's. And I won't be intimidated by your unfortunate incidents." Vance's mask slipped. "You'll regret this, Lily. You'll regret ever setting foot in this town." He turned and stalked out, slamming the door behind him. Silence hung heavy in the air. Dusty pushed himself off the doorframe and walked towards Lily. "He threatened you." "He did," she said, her voice steady. "But I won't be bullied." He looked at the map spread across her desk, then back at her resolute face. "He's good, Lily. Damn good. He's making it look like accidents. We need to find proof." Lily met his gaze. "Then we find it. Together." Dusty hesitated. He didn't trust easily, especially not women who suddenly claimed half his empire. But he saw something in her eyes, a genuine fire, a refusal to back down. He had to admit he needed her. He couldn't do this alone. "All right," he said, extending his hand. "Let's find out who's sabotaging our railroad." Lily shook his hand, her grip surprisingly firm. "Let's." Unmasking the Viper. Dusty scrutinized Lily's face, lamplight painting elongated shadows that danced with the airborne grit. She pored over the ledger, her brow knitted in fierce concentration, a sharp departure from the artless simplicity he'd once perceived. The air within the cramped Rivers Railroad office felt stagnant, thick with suspicion and the acrid tang of day-old coffee. He'd reluctantly conceded to her audit, partly to appease the board, partly out of a burgeoning curiosity. "These disbursements," Lily began, her voice hushed, stripped of its usual melodic quality. She indicated a string of entries cryptically labeled supplies. "The sums are inflated, and the frequency unusual." and they all trace back to a tight circle of individuals. Dusty edged closer, his initial skepticism clashing with a nascent disquiet. He recognized the names foremen, men he'd held in esteem. Accidents befall us, Lily. Railroading's a perilous trade. These accidents handily impeded progress on the southern extension, the very line that threatened Vance's dominion. She retorted, tapping a slender finger on the page. And these payments commenced just prior to each mishap. I surmise someone was incentivized to ensure those accidents transpired. A frigid premonition coiled in his stomach. It was a bold pronouncement, yet the evidence, it spoke volumes. We need to question these men, he stated, his tone curt. They located Jedediah propped against a stack of railroad ties, chewing tobacco and looking green about the gills. Dusty towered over him, Lily a step behind, her presence projecting a quiet fortitude he hadn't witnessed previously. Jedediah, Dusty commenced, his tone deceptively mild. Miss Lily here has been examining the accounts. She's unearthed some intriguing transactions. Jedediah ejected a stream of brown spittle into the dust. Ledgers don't know nothing about backbreaking work, Mr. Rivers. They know about currency, Jedediah. Currency furnished to you. Currency utilized to cripple my railroad. Jedediah's complexion drained of color beneath the grime. He shuffled his feet nervously. I ain't got no earthly idea what you're prattlin' on about. Lily advanced, her voice resonant and resolute. We are aware of Vance. We are aware he's been compensating you and others to orchestrate delays. We know about the compromised supports, the loosened fastenings. How much did he remit, Jedediah? Was it worth jeopardizing lives? The defiance seemed to leach from Jedediah. He glanced at Dusty, then at Lily, shame deeply etched on his features. He claimed it was merely slowing things down. Nobody was supposed to get hurt. Dusty felt a surge of wrath, searing and blinding. He pivoted, struggling to maintain composure. He wouldn't permit Vance to triumph. Not on these terms. The town hall meeting overflowed with bodies. Vance commanded the podium, impeccably attired in a bespoke suit, expounding upon the significance of judicious development and the perils of uncontrolled expansion. Dusty and Lily entered, their arrival seizing every gaze. Dusty dispensed with formalities. Vance, he declared, his voice slicing through the room like honed steel. Care to elucidate your largesse towards my workforce? Vance's face contorted, his composure fracturing. Rivers, you insult me. Such imputations are groundless. Groundless. Lily stepped forward, brandishing the ledger. These are the expenditure records. Supplies, you termed them. We possess witnesses, Mr. Vance. Witnesses prepared to testify regarding your endeavors to sabotage the Rivers Railroad. A ripple of murmurs traversed the crowd. Jedediah, appearing diminished beyond recognition, rose to his feet. It's the truth, he confessed, his voice barely audible. Vance provided payment. Vance spluttered, his face turning an alarming crimson. Fabrications. This is a conspiracy. Dusty experienced a dark satisfaction. He observed as the meticulously constructed facade of Vance Lyman disintegrated, revealing the venomous serpent beneath. The board members shifted uncomfortably, their whispers escalating in volume. The sheriff, formerly a silent spectator, advanced, his hand hovering over his sidearm. Lily stood alongside Dusty, her gaze unwavering. He regarded her, seeing not the unsophisticated servant girl he'd assumed he married, but a woman forged of steel, a woman who had just exposed a viper. He understood, with a start, that he didn't truly know her. And he wasn't sure if that realization filled him with trepidation or an even deeper fascination. Steel and song. Sunlight flashed off the steel badge on Deputy Harding's chest, drawing Dusty's gaze away from the rails disappearing into the distance. The lawman strode toward Vance, and a wave of relief, sharp and clean, doused the simmering resentment Dusty had felt since Vance's announcement. Vance Beaumont, you're under arrest for conspiracy, obstruction, and attempted market manipulation. Harding's pronouncement cut through the platform's cacophony. The rhythmic chug of engines, the vendors' calls, the travelers' mumble all faded as attention focused on the impending arrest. The color drained from Vance's face where moments ago triumph had bloomed. This is absurd. I have powerful allies, influence, Harding simply scoffed, a dry rasp. Pulling strings doesn't amount to much when the wires hum in a different tune, Beaumont. Your scheme to sink the railroad's stock caused quite a stir in Washington. With a metallic snap, the handcuffs closed around Vance's wrists. That click punctuated the abrupt end of Beaumont's ambition. As Vance was escorted away, Dusty saw the town's collective anxiety dissipate like the morning's fog. The railroad stock, previously in freefall, began a tentative climb, fueled by guarded hope. He spotted Lily nearby, observing the scene with quiet composure. Approaching her, his boots echoed on the planks. "Lily," he began, his voice a low rasp, "I owe you an apology." She turned, her expression a closed book. The afternoon sun emphasized the resolve hardening her features, a tenacity he'd underestimated. "Apology accepted, Dusty. But those are easy to give." He scrubbed a hand through his hair, a gesture revealing his discomfort. "I misjudged you. I thought you were something malleable. A mere pawn," she finished, her tone level. "Easily swayed? Ready to crumble under pressure?" He grimaced. "Something along those lines." Lily's eyes followed the tracks as they stretched into the west, a trail of opportunity. "I have a commitment, Dusty. To my uncle, to everyone whose livelihood depends on this line. I refuse to let it fail." Dusty shifted, studying her. He saw not a woman subdued by circumstance, but resolute strength beneath a veneer of grace. The image of her confronting Vance, her voice steady, resurfaced in his mind. Consumed by his own indignation, his own potential losses, he had failed to see the woman at his side, the one who held his future in her hands. A novel sensation sparked within him, a warmth divorced from the desert's heat. Could it be respect? Even more? "What are you going to do?" he asked, his curiosity genuine. "Exactly what I should have done all along. Take the reins." She met his gaze, her eyes firm. "And I intend to be successful." A soft laugh escaped Dusty. "All by yourself?" "Not necessarily." A trace of a smile touched her lips. "You understand this enterprise like no one else, Dusty. You know the terrain, the people, the obstacles. I grasp the intricacies of finance, strategy, and let's just say I'm learning the art of handling difficult men." The warmth intensified, spreading through him, akin to a slow-burning fire. He saw it then, the untapped potential, the promise of something greater than a business arrangement. He saw a true partnership, a future cemented in mutual respect and a shared vision. And he dared to admit he saw love. "What exactly are you proposing, Lily?" he asked, his voice gentler now. "A partnership. A genuine one. You manage the operations, the logistics, the gritty details. I'll handle the finances, the investments, the long-term strategy. Together, we can build this into something extraordinary." He weighed her proposition, his thoughts churning. He'd always imagined running the railroad solo, making all the decisions. But he realized with a start that Lily's vision was grander, more ambitious than his. And her fortitude was captivating. "And what about us, Lily?" he asked, the words lingering in the air. "What about this?" She reached out, her hand lightly touching his. A current, subtle but unmistakable, flowed between them. "That," she murmured, her voice a breath, "is something we'll need to discover together. But first, we have a railroad to rescue." He took her hand, his fingers entwining with hers. The steel tracks extended before them, representing the challenges ahead. But now he didn't face them alone. He had Lily, her strength, her insight, her soul. "All right, Lily," he said, his voice firm. "Let's carve out a future."